Hello everybody, welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabaz and as ever, I am the IT Geek. Welcome back to our SC300 Microsoft certification prep, study, whatever you want to call it, YouTube series. We are deep into module 3 now. It's a smaller module, but we are working our way through it. Before I get started, I'll introduce my co-host, my co-partner, Dwayne. Hi Dwayne.
Hey, how you doing, Shabaz?
Not bad, how are you? You alright?
I'm doing all right today. I'm powering through.
Yes, good.
It's early.
It's early for you, yeah. This is around lunchtime in the UK for anybody watching. So nice time difference between me and Dwayne. So it has been a bit of a challenge, but we've worked really well, I think, with timings and
Oh yeah.
made sure I've put a couple of curveballs in with random things that I need to do. So we've had to cancel a couple of recording sessions. But it's gone really well. So yeah, as I said, we're deep into module 3. It's a bit of a smaller module, but I will get us started. So obviously by now I'd hope to think you know who me and Dwayne are. We did a little introduction at the beginning of this series and beginning of this module. And I'll do a reintroduction into who we are and what we're about in module 4. So yeah, we are in module 3, and module 3 is on the topic of implementing access management for applications. Okay, so in this episode, we are going to take a look at part 2 of the planning, implementing, and monitoring the integration of enterprise apps for single sign-on. So we obviously did episode 1, which should be released on the same day, so you'll hopefully just watch that. So today we're going to talk about in this episode design and implementing app management roles. We're looking at monitoring and audit activity in enterprise apps. And then we're going to take a look at designing and implementing integration for on-prem apps using Azure AD App Proxy. And then I'll hand over to Dwayne. He'll take us through a bit of a demo. So we're not going to be quite configuring it, I believe. We're just going to be looking at a demo through the Azure portal of the App Proxy in the enterprise app sort of area. So let's look at designing and implementing app management roles first of all. In Azure AD, you can delegate application creation and management permissions, and you can do that by a few different ways. So firstly, you can restrict who can create applications and manage applications you create. You can also, by assigning one or more owners as well to an application. So assigning owners is a simple way to grant someone the ability to manage all aspects of Azure AD configuration of a specific application. So you're not giving them full access to Azure AD, just assigning them as an owner of that app. You can also assign built-in admins. So this role grants access to manage configuration as Azure for all applications. Okay, so not just a specific one, but all applications. Built-in roles are recommended for a way for you to grant IT experts access to manage, broad application configuration permissions without giving them that full access to the whole portal again. Again, this is all about that role-based access control and also that least privileged access model that we've spoken about a few times. Again, if you can do built-in roles, you can also do custom roles. So this is defining specific permissions and assigning to someone either to scope of a single application or like as a limited owner, or that directory level. Again, so you're scoping all the applications as a limited administrator. All these sort of methods of delegating, what they essentially do is increase that security posture and decrease your security footprint. Again, just keeps the applications more safer, so people have less access to improve that security posture. So I just want to talk about a few key points around app management. So in Azure AD, all users can register application registrations and manage all aspects of applications they create. Everyone also has the ability to consent to apps accessing company data on their behalf. What you can do is you can choose to selectively grant those permissions by setting the global switches to no and adding to selected users to the application developer role. So that's how you can restrict who can create apps essentially. Assigning the application developer role to grant the ability to create an application registration when the users can register application setting is set to no. So this role also grants permissions to consent on one's behalf when the users can consent to apps accessing company data on their behalf, and then setting that to no. Assigning owners is a simple way as well to grant the ability to manage all aspects of Azure AD. As a system behavior, when a user creates a new application registration, they're automatically added first as the owner. So that ownership permissions gives the user the ability to manage all those aspects of an application registration or that sort of enterprise app that they own. And again, we've touched on the sort of assigning built-in admin roles. So Azure AD has these built-in admin roles for granting access to manage configuration in Azure AD. An example of that is an application administrator. So the application administrator, this user, if I remember, the user in this role can create and manage all aspects of the enterprise applications, the application registrations, and the application proxy settings. This role grants the ability to consent to delegate permissions and application permissions as well, but that's excluding the Microsoft Graph. Another built-in role is the Cloud Application Administrator. So this user, if you're assigned this role, has the same permissions as the application admin role, excluding that ability to manage application proxy. Okay, so everything else but application proxy. So users that assign this with users who are assigned to this role, they're not added to that owners group when creating a new application registration or an enterprise application. So again, a bit more limited privileges than the application administrator to keep in mind there. Carrying on with some key points, we're talking about, again, we mentioned custom roles before. Let's just dig a bit deeper into that. Create a custom role. The way you do is you create a custom role definition and add permissions to it from that preset list. These are the same permissions used in the built-in roles. You then create a role assignment to assign that custom role you just created. Okay, so a couple of tips now when we're talking about creating those custom roles for delegating application management. Custom roles only grant access in the most current app registration blades of the Azure AD portal. They don't grant access in the legacy app registration blade, okay? Custom roles don't grant access to the Azure AD portal when the restrict access to Azure AD Administrator portal user setting is set to yes. So again, there's a setting within I think it's in the user settings. I think we've shown that in previous demos, but it's around accessing the Azure portal. If that's set to yes, then custom roles don't grant access to that Azure AD portal. So just to be wary of that and make sure you check that if you're having problems. So for app registrations, the user has access to role assignments only show up in the All Applications tab on the app registrations page. They don't show up in the Owned Applications tab. So again, this is stuff that might actually come up in the exam in some sort of scenario, so be wary of that. So I just want to touch on monitoring and auditing access to enterprise apps. So with Azure AD reports, you can get the information needed to determine how your environment is doing. With the Usage and Insights report, you can get an application-centric view of your sign-in data and find answers to questions like, what are the top used apps, what applications have the most failed sign-ins, and sort of what are the top sign-in errors of each application. So let's talk about using that report for a second. The Usage and Insights report shows the list of applications with one or more sign-in attempts and allows you to sort that by the number of successful sign-ins, failed sign-ins, and the success rate of those sign-ins. You can set the focus on a specific application as well, so you can select Review Sign Activity to see the sign activity over time for the application and the top errors. You can select View Sign Activity to see if sign activity over time for the application and the top errors. And also you can select a specific day in the application usage graph and then get detailed list of sign activities for the application on that day. Let's talk about audit logs now. So the Azure AD audit logs provide records of system activities for compliance purposes. Users in the Security Administrator, Security Reader, Report Reader, Global Reader, and I think the Global Administrator, obviously, these roles can access this data. So an audit log has a default list of views, and they show specific items. There's a number of items. Some of them I just want to touch on: the date and time of the occurrence, the service that logged that occurrence, the target, and also that initiator or actor of an activity. Okay, so that'll be the user objective or the user ID. So last couple of topics I want to touch on before I hand over to Dwayne. Enterprise Audit Log. So with application-based audit reports, you can get the answer to questions such as which app has been audited, which app has been added or updated, which app has been removed, has a service principal or an application changed at all, have any names of the applications changed, and who's actually given consent to an application. So again, a lot of valid information there that can help you troubleshoot different issues and potentially security risks or incidents. Okay, so just on the last section now, I wanted to look at designing and implementing integration for on-premises apps using Azure AD App Proxy. So this is what the demo is going to be based on, but just wanted to give a bit of an explanation as to, what does an App Proxy work with, essentially. So it works with web applications that use integrated Windows authentication for authentication. It works with web applications that use form-based or header-based access. It works with web APIs that you want to expose to rich applications, on different devices. The one I've used it, probably the most common scenario for me, is applications hosted behind a remote desktop gateway. I've done numerous deployments of that myself. And also it works with rich client apps that are integrated with a Microsoft Authenticator library or an MSAL. So now we know what it works with. I just want to do a little bit of go back to my diagrams if you don't mind quickly before we pass on to Dwayne. So how does it work? Okay, so we've got our administrator there. We have our App Proxy and Azure AD, that's in Azure. And then we have our sort of on-premises environment here. We have a connector, we have AD, and we have the web server. So the first thing is, after the user has accessed the application through an endpoint, the user is directed to an Azure AD sign-in page. After that successful sign-in, Azure AD sends that token to the user's client device. The client then sends that token to the application proxy service, which retrieves the user principal name, that UPN, and that security principal name, the SPN, from that token. The application proxy then sends that request on to the application proxy connector, which is installed on an on-premises server. If you have configured single sign-on, the connector performs an additional authentication required on behalf of that user. In step 5, the connector sends that request to the on-premises application, so that's the web server in our case. Step 6, that response is then finally sent through the connector and application proxy service back to the user, which is that big green line going all the way back. Okay, so now I've got a bit of an idea of what proxy service is, what sort of apps it works with, and how it works. I'll now hand over to my learned friend, Dwayne, to talk us through the demo.
Yeah, that showing the diagram of App Proxy always kind of lot going on there, but it's all done in the background. You don't see any of that.
Milliseconds, yeah.
Exactly, milliseconds of time for that all to take place. So as Shabaz was saying, this helps to bring those enterprise applications that are on premises, like those web applications, and bring those into the single sign-on environment, bring those into the enterprise applications through the application proxy. And the application proxy, as with everything, is right within the Azure AD. We've got the enterprise applications, we got the app registrations, we got the application proxy. As I was showing in the previous demo, if you go to Microsoft Entra, it's a little bit different now. You can see you got the app registrations here. We have our enterprise applications, and we have application proxy here within enterprise applications. So a little bit different, a little bit better, better coordination and sorting of information now. If you're looking for your applications, you go to applications, devices, users, groups. So this is going to start being I think the portal that everybody is going to use for identity and access going forward, and eventually the Azure Active Directory portal as we know it will get phased out. But like I said, similar look and feel, just a little bit better organization of everything, rather than just having everything under managed just in a list. So if we go to application proxy here, you can see there's different things here. We've got configure an app, we've got download, the connector service, new connector group. So all of these are things that we have to do as a connection. If you look at that diagram, we need to set that connector group so that we have application proxy set up here in Azure Active Directory. Then we have to put that connector service on our server in our on-premises environment to communicate with our Azure Active Directory environment, and then we have to configure. We really need to configure that app as well to utilize that app proxy and to register that application into single sign-on. So we've got kind of a three-step process here where we step through. We set up and have a internal URL. If it's an internal application, you can see it's important to have that there, and it's needed for the application proxy on the private network. If it is an external, if we're going to expose it to external, you can see it actually gives a suggested URL for the app proxy service, so you can get to it when you're not on the enterprise network, on the hybrid network. We set up where the connector group is, and then set up the cookie settings for this application. If we go back to our application connector, as we set up the new connector group, you can see we can set up, if we have existing connectors, we can set that up, or we can create another one. Again, then we have our regions that we can set that up in. And then once we get that connector set up, then we download the connector service, and you can see this gives the requirements for downloading that application proxy, what server operating systems it needs to be on. You can see it's a Windows-based connector, so you can't put it on a Linux server. It's got to be in Windows. Obviously, this is a Windows-based authentication technique, so it's working with Active Directory on premises, and it's communicating from that standpoint. You accept the terms, then you download it on your local device. So if you are connecting and creating an application proxy, you should be going through all of these steps and working on these steps within the application proxy itself. So keep that in mind and go from there. And I think that pretty much gives us everything that we need to know for application proxy. So I'm going to shoot it back to you, Shabaz.
Thank you, Dwayne. Another great demo again. Just trying to complement the sort of topics that we're talking about within this module. I'm a big fan of the RDS proxy, the app proxy. Like I said, we've used it in a lot of. It's kind of revolutionized the way you kind of use remote desktop services, because rather than having to expose that gateway into like a DMZ in the outside world, being able to use Azure App Proxy to facilitate that external connectivity. So people are actually hitting the app proxy, not the RD gateway. So quite a big fan of the app proxy. Obviously, it's obsolete now with Azure Virtual Desktop, but still a very good service. So yeah, another episode done. I believe that is now the enterprise SSO topic complete. So that's the 3 episodes. We hope it helps you in your exam prep. So just normal socials for myself and Dwayne, LinkedIn, Twitter are in the description. Most important bit, Dwayne's book, the link. It's an SC300 exam prep book we've packed that Dwayne wrote and authored. So that link for the Amazon is in the description. Dwayne said a lot of people have been buying it. We're hoping it's linked to this series. So please do go buy that to support Dwayne and follow it as you're following the series. And also the GitHub link to the labs for this, so you can follow the labs as Dwayne's doing them as well. So yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you, Dwayne. And up until next time, goodbye.